Hey guys, welcome back to another movie review. I got another Instagram voting winner thing, I guess. I don't know. I will do some other movie reviews, but because I've been doing such random choices, I've been trying to kind of do like the whole voting because I want you guys to pick what I watch. Because you guys are the ones watching the review, right? But anyway, so the last poll that I did was Reign of Fire versus Equilibrium, both Christian Bale films, both kind of sci-fi, fantasy-esque films. And the winner by a pretty wide margin was Reign of Fire. I don't know why I do like the long pause because I put the movie title in the video, so if you clicked on this you already know what I'm reviewing. But in case you are interested, follow me on Instagram if you want to keep up to date with what I am posting as my votes. I usually do my voting I usually do the poll on Sunday night, and it bleeds into Monday for my Tuesday review, or my Tuesday recording. So, Reign of Fire. I've seen this movie twice in my lifetime, and I don't remember it at all. Actually, I do remember one thing towards the end. But other than that, I really don't remember much like detail or like plot wise or anything like that. And it wasn't until my second viewing that I realized that that's Matthew McConaughey, which is really weird. It's not a normal look for him, like the bald and the beard and stuff. But anyways, yeah, I remember when this first came out, I was actually like in the middle of like this huge dragon obsession. Like I just loved dragons. Like it was just my thing. So then this movie came out and it was just like, it was perfect. And then, I don't know, 6-7 years later, I finally picked up a DVD copy of this and rewatched it, and I still think I enjoyed it. Because I wasn't as obsessed with dragons at that time. I still like dragons. Dragons are awesome. But, so yeah, I'm gonna give this one another go, and I'll see if it holds up to my vague recollection, or if it's utter crap. So I'll put it on and I'll give you my opinion on it after. Alright, so the movie's over, and I got nothing on this one. It's a generic film, really. Like there's nothing overtly wrong with the movie. It's just generic and kind of dull. The premise of the film is takes place in the distant future of 2020, which is funny watching it now. But the film starts out with Christian Bale's character as a kid. He goes to visit his mom, who's working in a drilling company where they're working on building a new railroad, and they unearth a dragon, and the dragon winds up killing his mother, and we flash forward years later, and the world has been ravaged by dragons, and Christian Bale is kind of the leader of this small survival group. They've hunkered down in this abandoned castle. They're kind of digging underground. They're hiding from the dragons and stuff. And they come across this, they don't come across this. Other team comes across them. This group of Americans show up, led by Matthew McConaughey's character. And McConaughey kind of says, I know how to kill these things. I've done it already. And he kind of like, he's got this like plan. He's got these ideas on how to kill dragons, and Christian Bale kind of lets him into the team, or lets them into the group, but starts to question McConaughey's sanity and whether or not he can actually do this or not. And yeah, that's kind of the movie. There's this kind of like power struggle between the two leads, but there's not really a lot of time developing that kind of issue. And then there's also like the threat of dragons, right? But yeah, like the performances are decent. Like they're not stellar. I wouldn't say these are like their best roles. But I mean, like, 'cause Christian Bale, he tends to do a pretty good job every time he acts. Matthew McConaughey is pretty substandard in my eyes. He's got a couple of good roles, but like he never really does anything that really surprises me. So this seems pretty typical of him. Gerard Butler's in there. He kind of throws in a couple of moments of levity, a little bit of humor, but he's not in it for very long, and he's not in it for very much. So, you know, and I think that's kind of what adds to the dullness of this, is that there's like very little humor. They play this movie very seriously. It's taking itself way too seriously. Like it's a world ravaged by dragons. It's the dragon apocalypse essentially. Like they could have had a lot more fun with this. They could have been a little more cheesy about it. They could have been a little more campy about it. But I think that's the main issue that this film has, is that it just tries too hard to be way too serious, when it could have just been a fun action film. And even towards the end, there's a little bit of campiness that I'll detail in the spoiler section, the specifics. But no, it's just overall, it's very dry, it's very bland, and not a lot happens. They have a couple of ideas that kind of happen, but nothing really. The movie's not long enough for it to really explore some of these things, or really flesh out some of these dynamics, and it just kind of seems to be like, kind of go from point to point to point. I feel like if this was handled by a better director and written by written by somebody that had a little bit more experience, this could have actually been a really decent movie. But as it is, it's just very subpar. In fact, who did write it? Yeah, no names on here that I recognize. So, you know, like I said, I wasn't going into this expecting it to be a fantastic film, but I don't remember it being this dull. And I just feel like, because like the concept of like dragons have risen and have like decimated the planet seems like a really cool idea, a really fun idea. You can have a lot of fun with that. And, you know, the conflicting nature between, not just between two men with differing ideals, but like two nationalities, because you've got a British and kind of like Scottish Irish mix in one hand, and then you got the Americans on the other side. So those kind of could have led to some interesting grappling with ideals and stuff. But overall, the film just, it doesn't do anything. Like the one thing I gotta give it credit for being a dull film, it's an hour and 40 minutes, and it does feel an hour and 40 minutes, which actually is a praise in my eyes, because it's like, it doesn't feel like it's overtly long. But I feel like that was part of the problems, that like I felt like they started to get into something, and then they transfer to the next plot point, and then they transfer to the next plot point, and then the movie's over. There's a couple of decent scenes, like involving the dragon, like the dragon attacks and stuff. Shortly after McConaughey's character arrives, there's a dragon attack, and it's actually a pretty decent scene. And sounds odd, but I feel like that scene in particular inspired the Halo jump scene in Godzilla, because these guys, to trap a dragon, they jump out of a helicopter and try and catch it with a net. But yeah, like the aside from like that and the climax, there's really nothing exciting in this movie. It's just kind of a lot of talking and a lot of underground scenes, which is another issue. I thought this film is very dark, and not like tone-wise, although it is trying to be dark tone-wise, but like it's just a very dark looking film. Like there's very little light in this film, and I don't know if it's because I'm running the DVD, or if it was just shot really darkly, but yeah, there's very high contrast, and there's a lot of stuff that you can't really make out. Speaking of not being able to make anything out, when there is an intense scene happening, it's comprised mostly of indistinguishable yelling. Whether it's the thicker accents from the Brit side, or if it's Matthew McConaughey with a cigar sticking out of his mouth. He's kind of yelling like this, you can't really understand what he's saying. Yeah, so like half the dialogue gets lost and mad. Plus, like they build up the music, and it gets really intense, and the drums start going off, and blah blah blah, and it wasn't intense. One thing another thing that I do have to kind of like, I'm shocked, but like in a good way about is the dragon effects are actually pretty decent. This is a 2002 film, and some of the CGI actually kind of looked like it held up a bit. There wasn't a few there like especially with the dragons themselves. The dragons actually look pretty good. However, there are a couple of scenes where someone will be running away from a dragon and the dragon will breathe fire and it looks like a really bad like Photoshop still image of a flame just coming at the person. It was really bad looking. But the dragon effects themselves were actually pretty decent. There were a couple of times where it was like very noticeably CGI. But yeah, I think the effects overall were actually pretty decent. So yeah, overall, I wouldn't actually recommend this film unless you're like a die-hard Christian Bale or Matthew McConaughey fan, or even a die-hard Dragon fan. Although there really isn't a whole lot of dragon action going on in this, so you might be disappointed by that. But yeah, unless you're like a die-hard Christian Bale, you gotta watch every film that he's in or every film that Matthew McConaughey's in. You're probably good just to skip this one if you haven't seen it. In terms of me holding on to the DVD, obviously, based on what I just said, I'm probably going to get rid of this one. This one's not going to stick around in my collection. Which is disappointing, because like I said, I was kind of hoping it was going to be this cheesy, fun silliness. I was kind of like expecting it to be bad, but in a good way, but it's bland, it's boring. There's nothing going on. So yeah, that's it for my like main thoughts. I'm just going to get into a little bit of detail here. There's nothing too comprehensive to really talk about. So when I was talking about ideas that kind of happen, at the beginning there's a character, I think his name's Eddie. He conflicts with Christian Bale. He wants to go harvest some of the tomatoes, some of the crops, to bring back to their camp, and Christian Bale says, no, if you go do that, then they're not going to germinate properly, they're not going to regrow next season, we're going to be out of food. And the guy disobeys him anyways and goes out. Him and a group of people go out, and a dragon catches them. The dragon burns down the crops. They get saved by Christian Bale and some other people. And that kind of ended that. There's a couple more points where this Eddie character shows up and he kind of has like conflicting ideas with Christian Bale, but there's really nothing that comes of that. I feel like there was like a whole story arc that involved these two characters kind of going at each other, but then they decided to write in Matthew McConaughey's character to be that conflicting ideal, but even that doesn't really pan out because like Matthew McConaughey shows up and Christian Bale doesn't really want to let him in, but talks to him and thinks that, oh, well, maybe this guy can offer us something that will work, like I can see something in his eyes. But then afterwards he feels that Matthew McConaughey is insane, and then Matthew McConaughey decides to, they discover that, or they reveal rather, that there's one male and the rest of the dragons are all female, and so they're laying the eggs, and then the male is fertilizing all the eggs, and that's how they're keeping their species alive. But there's one male, so they feel that if they can take out the male, then they can probably wipe out the whole dragon species. And so when Matthew McConaughey decides, I'm going to go after this thing, he's already lost a couple of his own soldiers, so he decides that he's going to ask for volunteers from Christian Bale's group of survivors. And only like a handful of them want to survive, or volunteer. So then Matthew McConaughey's like, okay, volunteer time's over. It's time for the draft. And he like tries to force people to join his side, which kind of felt a little out of character. Like he's a little psychotic, but he's not like cruel that way. And then all of a sudden he just becomes cruel. And then when they're trying to head into the city of London to find the male just kind of shows up and wipes everybody out except for Matthew McConaughey and the female lead. So it just felt like this really like pointless character development for the sake of tragedy, I guess. I don't know. Before I started the movie, I said that I only remembered one part. Similarly to Stealth, actually, it was a character dying, a side character dying. I remembered Gerard Butler died in this. And yeah, that was about it. And he pretty much died the way I remembered him dying. Like and it wasn't like very emotional. I didn't really feel like that much attachment to him. Like I said, he's hardly in the movie anyways. So yeah, that's all I really remembered from this film, and probably the only thing I'm really gonna remember. Although I did say that it does get a little cheesy towards the end, and I kind of wish that the whole movie was like this. But towards the end, when they decide, okay, we're gonna go after the male, and they've got their plan, they go after it. They're in the middle of like the mining area where the male has been nesting, I guess, or hiding, whatever you want to call it. And so they're coming up with their plan, and Matthew McConaughey decides, I'm going to go up to this top area to get a good view of it. He says if it comes up on me, then I can shoot it with this grenade arrow thing and take it out. And the dragon comes, so he's standing on top of this like tower, and the dragon comes up to him, and he shoots it with his grenade thing. It kind of stuns the dragon a bit, and it gets really angry, and it comes at him, and he pulls out this like battle axe, and he jumps off the tower. He's screaming, and he's like about to swing the thing, and the thing just eats him. It just comes out of nowhere and just eats him. It's very anticlimactic for McConaughey's character, but it was utterly like ridiculous and just silly, and I wish the whole movie had been like that. I probably would have had a lot more fun with it if it had been all that. But no, it was just that very brief moment at the very end of the film. So yeah, that's really all I've got to say about Reign of Fire. Yeah, that's it. That's all I got. There's not much to really work with this film, so I apologize for the slightly bland review, but it's a slightly bland movie, so I guess it's fitting. So anyways, thank you for watching, and if you enjoyed this, don't forget to subscribe if you yourself are jonesing for film.